I want you to imagine something for a moment. It is 1980. You are living in Milan, Italy. It is a Friday evening. You and your friends decide to go watch a new movie that everyone has been talking about. You have heard rumors that this film is unlike anything ever made before. You are curious. You buy your tickets, grab some popcorn, and sit down in the dark theater. The lights dim. The projector starts rolling. The screen flickers to life. For the first 10 minutes, everything seems normal. It looks like some kind of documentary about the Amazon jungle. Interesting. A little intense, but nothing too crazy. Then things start to change. The violence begins. At first, you think it is just a horror movie doing its thing. But then the camera work changes. It starts looking like real footage, raw, unedited, shaky. Like someone is actually there, filming something terrible as it happens. The screaming sounds too real. The blood looks too real. The fear on the actors' faces looks too real. People in the theater start shifting in their seats. Someone whispers, "Is this real?" Then the truly horrific scenes begin. A woman is impaled. A man is torn apart. Body parts are eaten. And the camera does not cut away. It just keeps filming. Close up. Unflinching. No dramatic music. No Hollywood effects. Just raw, brutal footage that looks like it was pulled from a crime scene. Someone in the front row stands up and runs out. Then another person. Then 3 more. A woman in the middle section starts vomiting right there in her seat. An old man near the back grabs his chest and has to be helped out by the staff. A teenager starts crying uncontrollably. Within 30 minutes, half the theater is empty. The people who remain are frozen in their seats, unable to move, unable to look away, trapped between horror and fascination. The next morning, newspapers across Italy are running the story. Is this a movie or a murder tape? Theater audiences flee in terror. Government demands investigation. 10 days after the film's release, police sirens cut through the quiet streets of Rome. Multiple police vehicles pull up outside the theater. Officers in uniform march inside. They go straight to the projection room. They seize every single film reel, every poster, every promotional material, everything. But they are not done. That same evening, those same officers drive to a residential neighborhood. They knock on a door. A middle-aged Italian man opens it. Before he can say a word, they grab his arms, turn him around, and slap handcuffs on his wrists. They push him into the back of a police car. Neighbors watch through their curtains, whispering to each other. The man being arrested is Ruggero Deodato, the director of the film. The charge filed against him is not obscenity. It is not public disturbance. It is not even animal cruelty, although that would come later. The charge is murder, first-degree murder. The prosecutor stands up in court and says with complete seriousness, "This man took 4 young actors into the Amazon jungle. He killed them. He filmed their deaths. And then he released those deaths as a movie for commercial profit. What you saw in the theater was not acting. It was real. Those people are dead. And this man killed them. The penalty being sought? Life imprisonment. Or possibly the death penalty." Let that sink in for a moment. A film director arrested for murder because his movie was too realistic. His own creation, the thing he poured his heart and soul into, is now the evidence being used to send him to the gallows. This film was eventually banned in over 50 countries around the world. In some nations, simply owning a copy could get you arrested and thrown in jail. Decades later, it still holds the record as the most banned film in the history of cinema. No other movie has ever been prohibited in more countries. This is the insane, terrifying, heartbreaking, and absolutely true story of Cannibal Holocaust. This is the darkest corner of film history that most people have never heard about. Welcome to the 9th reel. Let us begin. Part 1. The Birth of a Nightmare. How this insane movie was created. To understand Cannibal Holocaust, you first need to understand the man who created it and the world he was living in. The director. Ruggero Deodato was born on May 7, 1939, in Potenza, a small city in southern Italy. From a young age, he was fascinated by cinema. He grew up watching Italian neo-realist films, the raw and gritty movies that showed life as it really was, without Hollywood glamour or fantasy. He started his career as an assistant director, working under some of Italy's most respected filmmakers. He learned the craft from the ground up. Camera work, lighting, editing, storytelling. He absorbed everything like a sponge. By the late 1970s, Deodato had directed several films, but none of them had made a significant impact. He was in his early 40s and still relatively unknown. He was just another Italian director in a country that produced hundreds of films every year. He was desperate to make something that would put his name on the map. The cannibal film craze. Now, here is some important context. In the 1970s, Italian cinema was going through what film historians call the cannibal boom. A wave of exploitation films set in jungles, featuring cannibalistic tribes, was extremely popular in Italian grindhouse theaters. Films like The Man from Deep River in 1972, Jungle Holocaust in 1977, and Eaten Alive in 1980 were drawing huge audiences. These films were cheap to make, shot on location in real jungles, and they made enormous profits. The formula was simple. Take a group of civilized people, send them into an exotic jungle, have them encounter savage tribes, and show as much shocking content as possible. The more extreme the film, the more tickets it sold. Deodato had actually directed Jungle Holocaust himself in 1977. It was moderately successful. But he wanted to go further. Much, much further. He wanted to make the ultimate cannibal film. Something so realistic, so disturbing, so unprecedented that people would never forget it. He wanted to blur the line between fiction and reality so completely that audiences would not be able to tell the difference. The revolutionary idea. One evening, Deodato was watching the news on television. He was watching reports about political violence in Italy, the Red Brigade's terrorist group, kidnappings, and murders. And something struck him. The news footage looked real, because it was real. The shaky cameras, the poor lighting, the raw audio, everything about it screamed authenticity. Then he had his eureka moment. What if he made a movie that looked exactly like real footage? Not a polished Hollywood production with perfect lighting and dramatic music, but raw, unedited, shaky camera footage that looked like it had been filmed by amateurs in the field, footage that looked like it had been recovered from a crime scene. This concept would later become known as found footage. Today, we are familiar with it because of films like The Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity. But in 1979, when Deodato started planning his film, this concept did not exist. Nobody had ever done it before. He would be the pioneer, the inventor, the first person in cinema history to create a found footage film. The film would be called Cannibal Holocaust. The story. Let me walk you through the plot in detail, because understanding the story is essential to understanding everything that happened after. The film is divided into two distinct halves. The first half follows a respected New York University anthropologist named Professor Harold Monroe. He is contacted by a major American television network. They tell him that 4 young documentary filmmakers went into the Amazon rainforest several months ago to film a documentary about cannibal tribes. They went to an area called the Green Inferno, one of the most remote and dangerous regions on Earth. The area is home to 2 tribal groups known as the Yamamomo and the Shamatari, tribes that have had virtually no contact with the outside world and are rumored to practice cannibalism. The 4 filmmakers were led by a man named Alan Yates, an ambitious, aggressive, and reckless young director. With him were his girlfriend Faye Daniels, who served as the script supervisor and assistant, and 2 cameramen named Jack Anders and Mark Tomaso. They were young, fearless, and hungry for fame. They went into the jungle, and they never came back. Months passed with no contact, no radio messages, no letters, nothing. Their families were frantic. The television network was under pressure. So they hired Professor Monroe to lead a rescue expedition into the Amazon to find out what happened. Monroe travels deep into the jungle with a team of local guides. The journey is treacherous. The heat is unbearable. The insects are relentless. The terrain is almost impassable. They encounter the tribes, and through careful diplomacy and gift-giving, Munro earns their trust. He never finds the four filmmakers alive, but he does find something else. Their film cans and camera equipment buried in the mud near one of the tribal villages. The tribes had kept them, almost like trophies or sacred objects. Munro brings the film cans back to New York. The television network is thrilled. They want to broadcast the footage as a special program. They think it will get huge ratings. In a screening room, Munro and the network executives start watching the recovered footage, and this is where the second half of the film begins. The second half is entirely presented as the recovered footage shot by the four filmmakers, and this is where the film becomes something that audiences in 1980 were completely unprepared for. The footage reveals that the four filmmakers were not innocent documentarians. They were monsters. In their desperate quest for shocking footage that would make them famous, they committed horrific acts against the indigenous people. They burned down an entire village with the people still inside, just to film it. They assaulted tribal women. They tortured and humiliated the indigenous people. They staged violent confrontations and provoked the tribes into reacting aggressively, also they could capture it on camera and present it as evidence of savage behavior. At a certain point, the tribes had enough. Their patience broke. Their anger exploded. They captured the four filmmakers and did to them exactly what the filmmakers had been doing to the tribes. They killed them. They dismembered them. They ate them. And the camera kept rolling through all of it. It captured everything, every scream, every moment, until the camera finally fell to the ground and stopped recording. That is the plot of Cannibal Holocaust. Simple on the surface, but devastating in its execution. The deeper message. Here is what most people miss about this film. Beneath all the extreme content, Deodato was making a powerful social commentary. He was asking a profound question. Who are the real savages? The so-called civilized filmmakers from New York are the true monsters in the story. They exploit, brutalize, and destroy everything they touch, all in the name of entertainment and ratings. The indigenous tribes, the so-called cannibals, only become violent in response to being attacked first. Deodato was criticizing the media. He was criticizing how journalists and filmmakers exploit tragedy and suffering for profit. He was criticizing how Western societies label indigenous peoples as savages, while committing far worse atrocities themselves. The final line of the film, spoken by Professor Munro, is, "I wonder who the real cannibals are." It is a line that still resonates today, perhaps even more than it did in 1980. The production. The film was shot on location in the Amazon rainforest of Colombia, specifically in the Leticia region near the border of Colombia, Peru, and Brazil. The conditions were brutal. The cast and crew endured extreme heat, humidity, insects, diseases, and the constant danger of the jungle itself. The budget was relatively modest, approximately $100,000. The four lead actors were relatively unknown. Robert Kerman, an American actor, played Professor Munro. Carl Gabriel York played Alan Yates. Francesca Ciardi played Faye Daniels. Perry Perkanen played Jack Anders. And Luca Barbareschi played Mark Tommaso. The shooting took several weeks. Deodato pushed everyone to their limits. He wanted raw performances. He wanted real reactions. He wanted the actors to genuinely suffer, because that suffering would show on camera and make the film feel more authentic. And when I say he wanted them to suffer, I am not exaggerating. The reality behind the scenes was just as dark as the movie itself, perhaps even darker. Deodato was not just a demanding director. He was a tyrant on set, an absolute dictator. The actors were completely isolated from the outside world. No phone calls home, no letters, no contact with friends or family. They were deep in the Amazon jungle with no way to leave, no way to communicate, and no way to escape. Every single day, they waded through crocodile-infested swamps. Not fake Hollywood swamps with rubber crocodiles, real swamps with real crocodiles. The mosquitoes and insects were relentless. Multiple cast and crew members suffered from severe infections caused by insect bites. Some developed fevers. Some had allergic reactions, so bad that their faces swelled up. Medical help was hours away, sometimes a full day away by boat. The heat was unbearable. Temperatures regularly exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The humidity made it feel even worse. The actors were drenched in sweat from morning to night. Their clothes rotted on their bodies. Their skin was constantly covered in mud, dirt, and insect repellent that barely worked. But the physical suffering was only part of it. The mental and emotional toll was devastating. Deodato deliberately created an atmosphere of fear and tension on set. He would scream at the actors. He would belittle them in front of the crew. He would change the script without warning, forcing them to improvise scenes they were not prepared for. He would film for 14, sometimes 16 hours straight without breaks, pushing everyone to the point of collapse. The lead actor, Robert Kerman, who played Professor Monroe, reportedly developed an intense hatred for Deodato during the production. In later interviews, Kerman did not hold back. He allegedly called Deodato a sadist. He described him as a man who derived genuine pleasure from watching others suffer. Kerman claimed that he and Deodato got into screaming matches almost daily, with Kerman objecting to how the director treated the cast, the crew, and especially the local indigenous people who were hired as extras. Kerman later said in an interview, and I am paraphrasing here, "Working with Deodato was one of the worst experiences of my life. He was cruel. He was manipulative. He did not care about anyone's well-being. All he cared about was getting his shot. If someone was bleeding, he would say, 'Keep rolling.' If someone was crying, he would say, 'Keep rolling.' He was a monster behind the camera." Francesca Ciardi, who played Faye Daniels, also had a difficult experience. She has spoken about feeling completely powerless during the production. She was the only woman among the lead cast, deep in the jungle, far from civilization, with a director who pushed boundaries that should never have been pushed. The fear and tension you see on the actors' faces in the movie, the exhaustion in their eyes, the desperation in their voices, a lot of that was not acting. It was real. It was genuine misery captured on camera by a director who knew exactly what he was doing. Deodato wanted authenticity, and he got it, by making his actors' lives a living hell. Little did anyone know that this pursuit of authenticity would nearly destroy Deodato's life. The very techniques he used to make the film look real, the suffering he inflicted on his cast, the lengths he went to blur the line between fiction and reality, all of it was about to come back and hit him like a freight train. Part 2: Theaters of Terror, Riots, Vomiting, and Worldwide Bans. Cannibal Holocaust premiered in Italy on February 7th, 1980. And what happened next was unlike anything the film industry had ever experienced. Opening night. The first screenings were held in Milan. Word of mouth had been building for weeks. People knew this was supposed to be an extreme film, but nobody was truly prepared for what they were about to see. Deodato had done something brilliant, and as it turned out, incredibly dangerous. At the very beginning of the film, before any footage plays, a title card appears on screen. It reads something to the effect of, "The following footage is real." It was recovered from the Amazon rainforest. The events depicted actually occurred. This was a lie. It was all fiction, all acting, all special effects. But Deodato had designed the entire film to look as authentic as possible. The second half, presented as recovered footage, used handheld cameras, natural lighting, ambient sound, and a raw visual style that made it look indistinguishable from real documentary footage. And audiences fell for it completely. During the first screening in Milan, the reactions were extreme. Within the first 30 minutes, several audience members left the theater. By the midpoint of the film, when the truly graphic scenes began, people were running for the exits. The theater staff later reported that multiple patrons vomited in their seats, in the aisles, and in the bathrooms. At least 2 people fainted. One audience member reportedly stood up during a particularly graphic scene and screamed at the projectionist, "Turn it off! This is murder! You are showing us a murder!" Another man allegedly tried to climb up to the projection room to physically stop the film from playing. The theater manager, overwhelmed by the chaos, called the police. When officers arrived, they watched a few minutes of the film and were so disturbed that they immediately ordered the screening to stop. The media firestorm. The next morning, Italian newspapers exploded with coverage. Headlines screamed across front pages. Film of death shocks Milan. Director shows real murder on screen. Is this cinema or crime? Television news programs ran segments about the film. Journalists debated whether what was shown on screen was real or fake. Film critics were divided. Some called it a masterpiece of provocation. Others called it an abomination that should be destroyed. But here is the thing about controversy. It sells. The more the media talked about Cannibal Holocaust, the more people wanted to see it. Theaters that were still showing the film reported sold-out screenings. People lined up around the block, driven by curiosity, by the forbidden nature of the film, by the simple human desire to see something they were told they should not see. The bans begin. The Italian government moved quickly. Within days of the film's release, a magistrate ordered all prints of Cannibal Holocaust to be seized. The film was officially banned in Italy, but the film had already been distributed internationally. And as it arrived in country after country, the same pattern repeated. Outrage, controversy, and bans. Australia banned it almost immediately after it arrived. The Australian Classification Board refused to even give it a rating, effectively making it illegal to show, sell, or distribute in the country. The United Kingdom added it to the infamous Video Nasties list, a collection of films deemed so offensive that they were banned under the Video Recordings Act of 1984. Possessing a copy could result in prosecution. Norway banned it, Finland banned it, New Zealand banned it, Iceland banned it, Singapore banned it, Malaysia banned it, South Korea banned it. Brazil, despite the film being partially shot in the Amazon region, banned it. Germany banned it. Ireland banned it. The list goes on and on. In total, over 50 countries around the world banned Cannibal Holocaust at some point in its history. In several of these countries, merely owning a VHS tape, or later a DVD of the film, was a criminal offense. You could go to jail for having this movie in your house. To this day, Cannibal Holocaust holds the record as the most banned film in the history of cinema. No other movie, before or since, has been prohibited in more countries. Not A Clockwork Orange, not The Exorcist, not Salo, not The Human Centipede. None of them come close to the sheer number of bans that Cannibal Holocaust received. Public reaction around the world. The film became a global phenomenon, not because people loved it, but because people were horrified by it. It sparked debates about censorship, artistic freedom, the limits of cinema, and the ethics of shocking audiences. In Japan, a heavily censored version was released, with over 20 minutes of footage removed. Even the censored version caused walkouts. In France, the film was shown uncut in some underground theaters. Police raided several of these screenings and arrested the theater owners. In the United States, the film was never officially banned at the federal level, but individual states and cities prohibited its screening. It circulated primarily through underground bootleg copies and later through imported VHS tapes. The film became legendary. It became the movie that you whispered about, the movie that you dared your friends to watch, the movie that had an almost mythical status because it was so hard to see and so terrifying to talk about. Part 3. The Murder Trial. The courtroom drama that shocked the world. If you think the story ends with a few banned tapes and angry protesters, you are entirely wrong. Because what happened next is the reason we are talking about this film today. This is where the story goes from shocking to absolutely unbelievable. Before we get into the actual murder trial that shook the world, I need you to ask yourself a question. Just pause for a second and think about this. How do you prove that someone is still alive when you have already paid them to disappear? When you have signed a legal contract telling them to vanish from the face of the earth? When you have deliberately made sure that no one on this planet can find them? The answer to that question almost sent a man to the executioner, and the man who asked it was the same man who created the problem in the first place. Let me explain. The arrest, On February 17th, 1980, exactly 10 days after the film's premiere, Italian police arrived at Ruggero Deodato's apartment in Rome. They had a warrant for his arrest. Deodato opened the door expecting perhaps a fine or a summons related to the obscenity charges that were being discussed in the media. Instead, the officers told him he was being arrested on suspicion of murder. Multiple murder. He was handcuffed, placed in a police vehicle, and taken to the station. His passport was confiscated. He was formally charged and held in custody. The charge was devastating in its specificity. The prosecution alleged that Deodato had taken 4 actors into the Amazon rainforest, murdered them during the production of the film, captured their deaths on camera, and then released the footage as a commercial movie. In other words, they believed Cannibal Holocaust was a snuff film, a real recording of real murders, disguised as entertainment. The prosecution's case. The prosecution built what they considered a strong case. Their arguments were as follows. First, the footage looked too real. Multiple experts had watched the film and concluded that the violence depicted was beyond what could be achieved with the special effects technology available in 1979 and 1980. The wounds looked real. The blood looked real. The pain on the actors' faces looked real. The decomposition of the bodies looked real. And here is the thing. Remember what I told you earlier about how Deodato treated his actors on set? The exhaustion, the fear, the genuine suffering he inflicted on them. That worked against him now, because the prosecution pointed to the actors' expressions and said, "Look at their faces. That is not acting. That is real terror. That is real pain. Nobody can fake that." And they were partially right. The terror was real, but it was not because they were being murdered. It was because their director was making their lives a living nightmare. Second, the 4 lead actors had completely vanished from public life. After the film was completed, Carl Gabriel York, Francesca Ciardi, Perry Perkanen, and Luca Barbareschi had not appeared in any other films, television shows, interviews, or public events. They had seemingly ceased to exist. Their families had not heard from them. Their agents had lost contact with them. For all practical purposes, these 4 people had disappeared from the face of the earth. Third, the film itself contained what appeared to be actual death footage. A scene showing a woman impaled on a large wooden pole was so realistic that forensic experts initially could not determine how it could have been faked. The impalement appeared to penetrate the body completely, and the woman's expressions of agony appeared genuine. Fourth, Deodato had publicly bragged about how realistic the film was. In promotional interviews before his arrest, he had made statements like, "You will not be able to tell what is real and what is not." The prosecution argued that these statements were essentially confessions. The case was serious. Life imprisonment was absolutely on the table. If convicted, Deodato would spend the rest of his life behind bars, or worse. The judge's challenge. The presiding judge reviewed the evidence and the film itself. After watching Cannibal Holocaust, even the judge was disturbed. He turned to Deodato and issued a simple challenge. "Mr. Deodato, you claim these people are alive. You claim this is all fiction. Then prove it. Bring these 4 actors to my courtroom. Let me see them with my own eyes. Let me speak to them. If you cannot produce them, I will have no choice but to assume the prosecution is correct. This sounds like it should have been easy. Just call the actors, have them show up, and the case is over. Right? Wrong. The trap Deodato set for himself. Here is where the story becomes almost unbelievable. Remember what I said about Deodato wanting the film to feel completely real? He did not just make the film look like real footage. He went much, much further than that. Before the film was released, Deodato sat down with all 4 lead actors and presented them with a contract. This was not a normal acting contract. This was something unprecedented. The contract stated that for a period of 1 full year after the film's release date, all 4 actors were legally obligated to completely disappear from public life. They could not appear on television. They could not give interviews to newspapers or magazines. They could not be photographed in public. They could not attend film festivals, premieres, or any public events. They could not contact the media in any way. They had to essentially become invisible. Why did Deodato do this? Because he knew that if the actors were seen alive and well after the film's release, audiences would immediately know that the deaths in the film were fake. The entire illusion would collapse. The real footage gimmick would be exposed. The film's power would be diminished. He wanted the world to genuinely wonder, did these people really die? He wanted that question to hang in the air for as long as possible. He wanted the mystery to drive people to theaters. The actors agreed. They were paid a bonus for their cooperation. And they vanished. They changed their phone numbers. They stopped contacting their agents. Some of them even moved to different cities. They became ghosts. Now, you have to remember something very important about the time period. This was 1980. There was no internet, no social media, no Google, no Wikipedia, no way to easily fact-check a rumor or verify whether someone was alive or dead. If a person disappeared from public life in 1980, they could genuinely vanish. There was no digital footprint to trace, no Instagram posts to find, no Twitter accounts to check. If someone was gone, they were gone. And there was something else happening in the background that made everything 10 times worse. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, a massive urban legend was spreading across Europe and America. The legend of snuff films. People genuinely believed that there existed a secret, illegal, underground network of films where real people were actually murdered on camera. These films were supposedly made for the entertainment of sick, wealthy, and powerful individuals who paid enormous sums to watch real death. No verified snuff film has ever been proven to exist. It was an urban legend, a myth, a moral panic. But in 1980, people believed it was real. Law enforcement agencies across the world were actively searching for these supposed snuff films. The media ran stories about them. The public was terrified. So when Cannibal Holocaust hit theaters, with its incredibly realistic death scenes, its real footage disclaimer, and its 4 lead actors who had completely vanished from the face of the earth, the authorities did not think they had found a controversial horror movie. They genuinely believed they had finally found the holy grail of snuff films. They thought they had caught a serial killer who called himself a director. They thought the search was over. They thought this was the real thing. That is the context you need to understand. Deodato was not just facing a legal technicality. He was facing a terrified society that was already primed to believe that snuff films existed. And his movie, combined with his disappearing actors scheme, fit the narrative perfectly. And Deodato's plan worked beautifully. Too beautifully. Because now, sitting in a courtroom facing murder charges, he needed those ghosts to materialize. And he had no idea where they were. The desperate search. Deodato was in a bind. A terrifying, life-threatening bind. He could not simply tell the judge, "I paid them to disappear as a marketing strategy." That would sound insane. It might even be interpreted as evidence of a cover-up. The prosecution would argue that he was lying, that the disappearance contract was fabricated after the fact to explain why the actors could not be found. They would say he was a murderer trying to create an alibi. He needed the actors themselves, in person, in that courtroom, standing alive and breathing in front of the judge. That was the only thing that could save his life. The problem was, he had done too good a job of making them disappear. He did not know where they were. His own contract had been so effective that even he could not find them. The very plan he had devised to make his film legendary was now the noose tightening around his own neck. Deodato hired private investigators, multiple teams. He sent them across Italy, across Europe, even to the United States. They searched for weeks. Every day that passed without finding the actors was another day closer to a guilty verdict. Another day closer to spending the rest of his life in prison. The investigators tracked down old addresses, contacted distant family members, visited places where the actors used to frequent. They knocked on doors, they made phone calls. They followed leads that went nowhere, dead end after dead end. Deodato later described this period as the most terrifying time of his life. More terrifying than anything he had ever put on screen. He could not sleep. He could not eat. Every morning he woke up thinking, today might be the day they give up looking and just convict me. But slowly, painfully, one by one, the investigators found them. Luca Barbareschi was the first to be located. He was living quietly in a small town in northern Italy, completely off the grid. When the investigators found him and explained the situation, that Deodato was facing the death penalty, Barbareschi was stunned. He agreed to come to court immediately. Carl Gabriel York was found in New York City. He had gone back to the United States and was living under the radar, faithfully honoring the contract. He had no idea that his disappearance was being used as evidence of his own murder. Francesca Ciardi was located in Rome itself, just a few miles from the courthouse. She had been living normally, but avoiding all media contact as per the agreement. The irony was almost painful. She was right there, in the same city, while Deodato was being tried for her murder. Peri Perkanen took the longest to find. He was eventually located and persuaded to testify. The day in court. The day the actors appeared in court was one of the most dramatic moments in Italian legal history. I wish there was video footage of this moment because it must have been absolutely extraordinary. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, photographers, legal observers, and curious members of the public filled every seat and lined the walls. Camera crews waited outside on the courthouse steps. This had become the most talked about trial in Italy. Deodato's lawyers called the first actor to the stand. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and there stood Luca Barbareschi, alive, healthy, breathing, smiling nervously, but very much alive. A gasp went through the courtroom, actual audible gasps. Some journalists later described the moment as electric. The prosecution team looked visibly shaken. The judge leaned forward in his chair, comparing the man standing before him with the images from the film. Same face, same build, same bone structure, same everything. This was clearly, unmistakably the same person who had been shown being killed and eaten in Cannibal Holocaust. One by one, the other actors entered the courtroom. Each entrance was more dramatic than the last. Each time the gallery murmured in astonishment. These people were supposed to be dead. The prosecution had built an entire case on the premise that they were murdered. And here they were, walking into the courtroom, very much alive, very much confused about why they were there, and very much annoyed that their contracts had been broken. But Deodato was not done. He still needed to address the second part of the prosecution's case. The realistic violence, the forensic experts who said the effects were too good to be fake. He brought equipment into the courtroom, cameras, fake blood, prosthetics, rubber body parts, latex molds. And right there, in front of the judge, the prosecution, the defense, and the entire gallery, he demonstrated exactly how every death scene in the film was created. The impalement scene. The most controversial scene in the film shows a woman from one of the indigenous tribes impaled on a large wooden pole. It looks absolutely horrifying and completely real. The prosecution's forensic experts had been unable to explain how it was faked. This was their strongest piece of evidence. Deodato revealed the secret. It was brilliantly simple. The actress sat on a bicycle seat that was attached to the wooden pole. She held a small piece of carved wood in her mouth, angled upward, which made it look like the pole was coming out through her mouth from below. The camera was positioned at one very specific angle that hid the bicycle seat completely and created the perfect illusion of the pole penetrating through her entire body. He demonstrated this technique live in the courtroom. When the judge saw how simple and clever the trick was, his eyes widened. The prosecution lawyers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Deodato then went through scene after scene, methodically explaining every special effect. The fake blood was a mixture of red food coloring, corn syrup, and other common household ingredients. The prosthetic wounds were made from latex and sculpted rubber, molded to match the actor's skin tones. The intestines were made from rubber tubing filled with fake blood. The camera angles were carefully chosen to hide the mechanics of each effect and maximize the illusion of realism. With each demonstration, the prosecution's case crumbled a little more. The verdict? After seeing all 4 actors alive and watching Deodato's detailed special effects demonstrations, the judge was finally convinced. The murder charges were dropped. Ruggero Deodato walked out of that courtroom a free man, but he was shaken to his core. He later said in interviews that the experience terrified him more than anything he had ever put on screen. He genuinely believed, at certain points during the trial, that he was going to prison for the rest of his life. Or worse. He said, "I created a monster, and that monster almost ate me alive. The film was designed to blur the line between reality and fiction, and it worked so well that even the law could not tell the difference. I nearly died because of my own success." Never before in the history of cinema, and never since, has a film director been arrested and charged with murder because his film was too realistic. It is a completely unique event in the entire history of filmmaking worldwide. It has never happened before, it has never happened after, and it will probably never happen again. Because no filmmaker will ever be crazy enough to do what Deodato did. Part 4. The real darkness. The animal cruelty that crossed every line. Now we need to talk about the part of this story that I cannot excuse. The part that I cannot explain away. The part that makes this film genuinely problematic, regardless of its artistic merits or its historical importance. The human deaths in Cannibal Holocaust were fake. The special effects were brilliant. The acting was convincing. Nobody actually died during the making of this film. But the animal deaths were 100% real. During the filming in the Amazon rainforest, several animals were killed on camera. Not with special effects. Not with rubber props. Real, living, breathing, sentient animals were killed specifically for the purpose of being filmed dying. A large turtle was captured, killed, and dismembered on screen. The scene is extended and graphic. A monkey was killed. A large snake was killed. A pig was slaughtered. A coatimundi, which is a small raccoon-like animal native to South America, was killed. A tarantula was killed. A small rodent called an agouti was also killed. These scenes remain in the film to this day. They are real, they are disturbing, and they are indefensible. Deodato has addressed this issue multiple times over the decades, and his responses have been inconsistent. In some interviews, he expressed genuine regret. He said that if he could go back in time, he would not include the animal killings. He acknowledged that it was wrong. He said that the desire for realism had pushed him too far, that he had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. In other interviews, however, he was less apologetic. He pointed out that the animals were killed by the indigenous people who participated in the film, and that these killings were part of their normal daily life. The tribes hunted and killed animals for food regularly. The film simply captured what was already happening. He also argued that in rural Italy, where he grew up, animals were slaughtered regularly and nobody thought twice about it. This defense has never been accepted by animal rights organizations or by the general public. Groups around the world condemned the film. The argument against Deodato is simple and powerful. Regardless of local customs, regardless of cultural norms, deliberately staging and filming the killing of animals for entertainment purposes is morally wrong. The animals did not choose to be in the film. They did not consent. They suffered and died so that a filmmaker could make his movie more realistic and more shocking. The irony is devastating. Deodato was arrested for killing humans, which he did not do. But the animals he actually did kill on camera resulted in comparatively minimal legal consequences. He was eventually fined and given a suspended sentence for animal cruelty, but he never served jail time for it. The fake crime nearly destroyed his life. The real crime went relatively unpunished. Let me be absolutely clear about our position on this. We at the Ninth Reel strongly condemn animal cruelty in any form. No piece of art, no film, no pursuit of realism, no creative vision, nothing in this world justifies the deliberate killing of animals for entertainment. This was wrong when it happened in 1980. It would be wrong today. It will always be wrong. There is no debate. There is no nuance. It is simply wrong. This is the primary reason why Cannibal Holocaust remains deeply controversial to this day. While some film historians acknowledge its importance and its artistic vision, the animal cruelty is an unforgivable stain that prevents many people, rightfully so, from watching or appreciating the film. Several re-releases of the film over the years have included options to watch a cruelty-free version with the animal death scenes removed. But the damage to the film's reputation was done decades ago and can never be undone. Part 5. The Legacy. How one controversial film changed cinema forever. Despite everything, and I mean absolutely everything, the controversy, the bans in 50 countries, the murder trial, the animal cruelty, the public outrage, the protests, Cannibal Holocaust left an undeniable permanent mark on cinema history. Its influence can be felt in theaters, on streaming platforms, and in video games to this very day. The birth of found footage. The single most significant legacy of Cannibal Holocaust is the found footage genre. Before this film, the concept of presenting a fictional story as real recovered footage simply did not exist in cinema. Deodato invented it. He was the first person to ever do it, and it changed everything. Think about that for a moment. Every found footage movie you have ever seen, every shaky camera horror film, every based on real footage thriller, all of it traces its origins back to Cannibal Holocaust. And the found footage genre has generated billions of dollars in revenue over the decades. Let me walk you through the major ones. The Blair Witch Project in 1999 is widely credited as the film that popularized found footage for mainstream audiences. It was made for approximately $60,000 and earned nearly $250 million worldwide. It became a cultural phenomenon. People genuinely believed it was real. Websites were created to support the fiction that the events actually happened. It was a marketing masterclass. But the directors of the Blair Witch Project, Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, have acknowledged that Cannibal Holocaust was an influence on their work. Without Deodato's film, the Blair Witch Project might never have existed. Paranormal Activity in 2007 took the found footage concept into the supernatural horror realm. Made for just $15,000, it earned nearly $200 million worldwide. It spawned an entire franchise consisting of 6 films, totaling over $900 million in worldwide box office revenue. Again, without Cannibal Holocaust showing that found footage could work, Paranormal Activity might never have been conceived. Cloverfield in 2008 applied the found footage approach to a giant monster movie, earning over $170 million worldwide. Riots in 2007, the Spanish zombie film, used found footage to create one of the most terrifying horror films of the 2000s. Chronicle in 2012 used it for a superhero origin story. Unfriended in 2014 used it for social media horror. As Above, So Below in 2014 used it for underground exploration horror. The list goes on and on and on. Found footage has become one of the most profitable and popular subgenres in all of cinema. Hundreds of found footage films have been made since Cannibal Holocaust. They have collectively earned billions of dollars. And every single one of them owes its existence to a controversial Italian director who had a crazy idea in 1979. Influence on horror cinema. Beyond found footage specifically, Cannibal Holocaust influenced the broader horror genre in several important ways. It demonstrated that extreme content could generate massive public attention and commercial interest. It proved that controversy itself could be a marketing tool, a powerful but dangerous one. It showed that low-budget filmmaking could compete with and even outperform major studio productions if the concept was strong and original enough. Films like Hostel, the Saw franchise, The Green Inferno by Eli Roth, which was directly inspired by Cannibal Holocaust and even took its name from the film, the August Underground series, a Serbian film, and numerous other extreme horror films all owe a debt to Deodato's work. Whether you think that debt is a blessing or a curse depends on your perspective. The mockumentary and reality TV connection. Some film scholars and media theorists have drawn a fascinating line from Cannibal Holocaust to the rise of reality television and mockumentary filmmaking. The film's central themes, that the camera itself can be a weapon, that filmmakers can be more dangerous than the subjects they film, that the pursuit of ratings and views and clicks can lead to moral corruption. These ideas have only become more relevant with each passing year. When you watch a YouTube channel that stages dangerous stunts for views and someone gets hurt, you are seeing what Cannibal Holocaust warned us about. When you see influencers exploiting vulnerable people for content, you are seeing what Cannibal Holocaust warned us about. When you witness news channels sensationalizing tragedy and human suffering for ratings, you are seeing what Cannibal Holocaust warned us about. When you scroll through social media and see people filming accidents and crimes instead of helping, you are seeing what Cannibal Holocaust warned us about. In 1980, Deodato made a film about filmmakers who would do anything for footage. In 2024, we live in a world where millions of people will do anything for content. In many ways, Cannibal Holocaust was not just a horror film, it was a prophecy. Part 6. Ruggero Deodato, the man behind the monster. What happened to Ruggero Deodato after the trial? He continued making films, but he could never escape the shadow of Cannibal Holocaust. It followed him everywhere, every interview he gave, every festival he attended, every article written about him, every conversation he had with a journalist or a fan, inevitably circled back to that one film. He made other movies. He lived a full life. But to the world, he was always and forever the Cannibal Holocaust director. He directed several more movies in the 1980s and 90s. Cut and Run in 1985, Body Count in 1986, The Washing Machine in 1993, Phantom of Death in 1988. But none of these achieved anything close to the notoriety, the cultural impact, or the commercial success of Cannibal Holocaust. In his later years, Deodato became something of a cult figure in the horror community. Dedicated horror fans treated him with a mixture of reverence, curiosity, and cautious admiration. He was invited to horror conventions around the world, where fans would line up for hours to get autographs and photographs. He would sit at a table, an elderly Italian man with kind eyes and a warm smile, signing pictures from the most banned film in history. There was something surreal about it. He often expressed complicated, sometimes contradictory feelings about his most famous work. On one hand, he was proud of the film's impact on cinema. He knew he had created something historically significant. He knew he had invented a genre. He knew his name would be remembered long after his death. On the other hand, he was clearly troubled by certain aspects of the film, particularly the animal cruelty, and the murder trial had left deep scars that never fully healed. In interviews given in the 2000s and 2010s, Deodato was often reflective and sometimes visibly emotional. He acknowledged that he had gone too far in certain respects. He said that if he were making the film today, he would do many things differently. He talked about the toll the trial had taken on his mental health, his relationships, and his career. He talked about the sleepless nights, the fear, the feeling of the walls closing in. But he also defended his work. He said the film's message was more important than ever. He said that the media landscape had evolved exactly as his film predicted, toward sensationalism, exploitation, and the erosion of ethical boundaries in pursuit of attention and profit. Ruggero Deodato passed away on December 29, 2022, at the age of 83, in Rome, Italy. He died peacefully in his home, surrounded by people who loved him. When the news of his death broke, the film world responded with an outpouring of tributes. Horror directors, film critics, festival organizers, and fans from around the globe shared memories and assessments of his legacy. The obituaries described him as a controversial genius, a filmmaker who pushed the boundaries of cinema further than perhaps anyone else in history, a man whose single greatest work simultaneously elevated and haunted him for over 4 decades. He created one film that changed cinema forever. That same film nearly killed him, and it defined every remaining day of his life. There is a strange, poetic, almost tragic symmetry to that. The final thoughts. So where does this leave us? What do we take away from this extraordinary, disturbing, and unforgettable story? Cannibal Holocaust forces us to confront some deeply uncomfortable questions. Questions that do not have easy answers. Questions that have been debated for over 40 years and will likely be debated for 40 more. How far is too far in the name of art? Every great artist pushes boundaries. That is what art is supposed to do. It is supposed to challenge us, provoke us, make us uncomfortable, force us to think about things we would rather ignore. But is there a line that should never be crossed? And if so, who draws that line? Who gets to decide what is acceptable and what is not? Is it ethical to deliberately deceive your audience? Deodato designed his entire film to make people believe they were watching real death. He made his actors sign contracts to disappear. He put fake disclaimers claiming the footage was real. Is that brilliant, innovative filmmaking? Or is it cruel, irresponsible manipulation? And is there really a meaningful difference between the two? Can a deeply problematic work of art still have lasting value? Cannibal Holocaust contains real animal cruelty. That is indefensible, period. But it also invented an entire film genre that has entertained hundreds of millions of people and generated billions of dollars. It influenced decades of cinema. It raised critically important questions about media ethics, journalistic exploitation, and the commodification of human suffering. Questions that are arguably more relevant today than they were in 1980. Can we acknowledge its artistic and historical significance while simultaneously condemning its moral failures? Or does the darkness of the film's creation permanently taint everything it achieved? And perhaps most importantly, and most uncomfortably, what does this film tell us about ourselves? Why are human beings drawn to extreme content? Why do we slow down to look at car accidents? Why do violent videos go viral on social media? Why did audiences in 1980 line up around the block to see a film that they knew would traumatize them? Why do millions of people today seek out the most disturbing content the internet has to offer? Cannibal Holocaust does not answer these questions, but it forces us to ask them. And maybe that is the most valuable thing any piece of art can do. One man made one film. That film nearly got him executed. It was banned in more countries than any other movie in history. It invented an entire genre. It predicted the future of media. It traumatized millions. It fascinated millions more. And over 4 decades later, we are still talking about it. We are still arguing about it. We are still trying to figure out what it means. That is the power of cinema, for better and for worse. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Was Cannibal Holocaust art or exploitation? Should films like this be banned? How far should a filmmaker be allowed to go? And have you ever seen a movie that genuinely disturbed you to your core? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you want more stories about banned, cursed, and controversial films, drop a comment below. Write Part 2, and I will bring you the next chapter in the dark history of cinema. I have stories that are just as shocking, just as unbelievable, and just as important as this one. If this video made you think, if it shocked you, if it taught you something you did not know before, hit that like button. It takes 1 second, and it helps this channel more than you know. Subscribe to The Ninth Reel. Turn on that notification bell. Share this video with someone who loves cinema history, someone who appreciates stories that go deeper than the surface. Your support is the only reason this channel exists. Every subscriber, every like, every comment, every share, it all matters. And I am grateful for every single one of you. Remember this the next time you watch a found footage film. The next time you see shaky camera work presented as reality. The next time someone tells you based on true events. Think about where it all started. Think about a controversial Italian director who went too far and nearly paid for it with his life. Think about a film that was so realistic that the law could not tell the difference between fiction and murder. Think about Cannibal Holocaust. This is The Ninth Reel. Keep watching films. Keep questioning what you see. Keep thinking about what it all means. And maybe, just maybe, keep the lights on tonight. See you in the next one.